Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be talking about a group called the Children of God. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be determining if this group is a cult or not based on the criteria that I discussed in my previous video, What is a Cult? The link for that is going to be in the description. First, we're going to go through the history of this group, and while we're going through this history, I will be counting red flags that stand out to me about this group. Just things that I see that are pretty concerning. And at the end, we will go over these red flags and see how they fit into my criteria for a cult. This is my second video off of MetaRuner's Iceberg, and the link for that is going to be in the description as well. I do want to say, before we get started, that it's not my intent to slander anyone in this video. It's not my intent to say anything that isn't true. I've done some research for this video, and the link for all the research and my sources is going to be in the description. And with that said, let's begin. All right, so in order to have an understanding of this group, we first need to have a bit of understanding about the group's founder, and his name is David Berg. Berg was born in 1919 to Virginia Brandt and Hjalmar Berg. And these two were both Christian evangelicals. Based on the research I did, it seemed that Berg's mother, Virginia, seemed to have more of an impact on his life than his father. It seemed that Christian evangelism also went deep in his family, as Berg's grandfather, John Brandt, was the founder of a movement that eventually led to the Christian denomination Disciples for Christ. It's also interesting to state that Berg's family was kicked out of this denomination for his mother's claim to have the gift of divine healing. After some time, Berg grew up, he finished schooling, and he became pastor at a church. The denomination of this church was Christian Missionary Alliance. He was soon kicked out of this church and out of this denomination for alleged relational misconduct with one of the workers. For those of you that don't know, I'm saying relational and relations in order to keep YouTube happy. I don't think that we have to go into too much about what relations or relational means, but in case you're in the dark, just think of Bill Clinton when he did not have relations with that woman. Anyway, moving quickly along from that, this incident marks our first red flag that we're going to talk about today. In 1968, Berg started the Children of God. Interestingly enough, this group was not called the Children of God at this time, but instead it was called Teens for Christ. This group was founded out of a coffee shop in Orange County, California. Berg and his followers met there until Berg claimed to have a revelation from God saying that a major earthquake was to strike California in the near future and that they would have to evacuate the area. Now, to be fair, an earthquake of 6.5 magnitude did strike this area in 1968, but earthquakes also struck the area in 1971, 1975, 1978, and there were also two in 1979. So I wouldn't exactly put my money on this being some form of divine revelation. I would just say Berg had the reasonable understanding that California was going to see yet another earthquake. Once on the road, this group adopted the name the Children of God, and this is the name that it would stay until 1976. The beliefs of the Children of God could best be described as a mix of Christian evangelism with counterculture beliefs that were common in the 1960s. Some of the countercultural beliefs could be seen as progressive sexuality, as well as a strong distrust for the government. Berg, however, he pressured his followers to distrust more than just the government. So much so that he coined the term the system to refer to anyone that was outside of this group. This effectively created an us versus them mentality and made the connections in the group that much stronger at the expense of any relationships that they might have outside of the group. And this is going to be our second red flag. Over time, Berg took titles such as Moses, the Last Times Prophet, king, and several other titles. And this is going to be our third red flag. Over some time, Berg's group grew fairly large, and he entrusted a number of leaders and placed them in different areas in cities around the world. This group of leaders was then referred to as the Chain. Now, I did check, and this did not have any relationship to Fleetwood Mac's hit song The Chain, which came out in 1977, which was a little bit disappointing to me. However, I will say that, fun fact, Jeremy Spencer, one of the lead members of Fleetwood Mac, did leave Fleetwood Mac, and he became a member of this group. It is also important to say that this group was pretty large. This wasn't a group with a couple locations and a few hundred followers. No, this group had over 130 communities by 1972. And it is also said that these communities were spread across 70 countries by the mid-70s. Berg was able to keep in contact with these leaders and give instructions for them to lead the groups. And he did this through a series of letters called the Mo letters, Mo being short for Moses. In one of these letters, Berg referred to himself as God's prophet for the contemporary world, and this sort of solidified his leadership among his followers. And this is going to be our fourth red flag. Another interesting letter was written in 1972, and many people of the group believed this letter to prophesy the destruction of America. So what this did was it prompted even more members to go overseas and leave the country. There was also another reason why a lot of members were leaving the country, and this was that some of the parents whose children were in this group were trying to retrieve their children from this group. And in order to prevent this from happening, the leadership saw fit to send these kids overseas and out of their parents' reach. And this is going to be our fifth red flag. All right, so now we're going to talk about red flag number 6, and this is a big one. This is what the group is arguably most known for, and that is their tactic of flirty fishing. Oh boy. So, in short, what this tactic was sending women of the group out to have relations with men that would be potential recruits for this group. They would go have relations and then invite them back. This practice was seen in Berg's inner circle as early as 1972, but it became mainstream practice of the group in 1976. Around 1976, the Children of God got another rebrand to be called the Family of Love, and this would last until 1981. This rebrand was surrounded by several allegations against the group. Some of these allegations consisted of relational abuse, relations with minors, as well as excessive corporal punishment. Now, it's important to say that these were not baseless allegations, as based on what I have heard and what I have read, there is a significant amount of evidence behind them. And these allegations are going to mark red flag number 7. Now, despite the controversy over the tactic flirty fishing, this tactic actually increased after this rebrand. They also got more creative with their tactics. This group could be seen to partner with escort agencies in order to gain more potential recruits. One thing that Berg also did during this time was he made the statement saying that God is for relations while the devil is against them. This was done in order to justify the methods that he was using, and this is going to be red flag number 8. This group was then rebranded once again to the Family in 1982, and this would be the name of the group up until the year 2003. During this era, the leadership reminded their members that adult-child relations was considered to be forbidden, and that anyone that was caught in these acts would be excommunicated from the group. This was then officially put into their literature in 1986. Now, it is my opinion, as well as the opinions of many other people, that this was done and this was stated by the group in order to get ahead of these allegations, not necessarily that their beliefs or practices had actually changed. What they then presented to the public and media at this time was that their beliefs more so aligned with mainstream Christianity, and they would do things that were seen by mainstream Christianity at this time, such as condemning homosexuality. Now, the end of this era was marked with the passing of Berg in 1994. After Berg's passing, Karen Zerby, which was Berg's wife, took over. A little backstory on Zerby: she was actually Berg's second wife. Berg still had his first wife at the time. I guess he just felt the need to have two for some reason. Zerby took on names that were similar to Berg's. She took on the name of Queen Maria, and other things as well. And this is going to be red flag number 9. Zerby did not do her ruling alone, however, as she soon remarried a man named Steve Kelly, who was part of the congregation. It's interesting to note that Kelly actually became the face of the group, and he did a lot more speaking than Zerby did. This era can also be marked by drastic changes in the group. These changes were said to be better by a lot of people. Zerby did a lot to revamp the rules and guidelines that dictated the day-to-day runnings of this group. Another important thing to note for this era was a British court case. In short, this case ruled that there was relational abuse, child relational abuse, as well as excessive corporal punishment, and the group taking unlawful custody of minors. Despite this, the case ruled that Zerby's group would still be considered a safe place for children so long as they renounce Berg's former teachings. And this moves us to our last stage of the group. During this stage, the group took a rebrand once again as the Family International. This group took on the name from 2004 until present day. Now, all these name changes are going to be a red flag to me as well, and I'll explain why a little bit more later. During this time, Zerby also created the document, the Love Charter, and this was said to be the document that improved the quality of the life of the members of this group significantly. There are various theories that surround where this group may be today. Some say that the group primarily went online. Others say that this group has fizzled out completely, while even more theories state that this group went underground in order to avoid detection. Another interesting thing to note about this is that Zerby's whereabouts are currently unknown. I believe the last time she was spotted was somewhere in South America. All right, so is this group a cult? Well, the way that we determine if this group is a cult is by looking at 3 elements. The 3 elements are going to be control, deception, and exploitation. And I've gone into these in depth in my previous video, What is a Cult? And the link for that is in the description. So with that said, let's dive into those, starting with control. All right, so cults need control in order to keep their members in line. They'll control their members through various ways. I was looking into it, and there's this guy named Stephen Hassan that does a really good job at actually explaining the different ways that cults can control their members. He uses a model called the BITE model to do this. Now, BITE is an acronym, and it stands for Behavioral, Informational, Thought, and Emotional Control. And if you want to do some more research on your own, I would strongly recommend going to his website. His website is called thefreedomofmind.com, and that can be found in the description as well. Also, if you want to see more examples of control, you can also refer to my previous video that I stated before. All right, moving on to deception. Deception is needed by leaders of cults because if they straight up told their followers what they believed and what their tactics actually were, the followers would soon promptly run the other way. So instead, they do a form of bait and switch. They may give their followers a little bit of an idea of what they believe or what they do, but they'll never get the full picture. Now, examples of deception can be seen in my previous video as well. Lastly, exploitation. So cult leaders create the cults for some form of benefit to themselves. These benefits can usually be seen in the areas of power, money, and relations. So they reap these benefits at the expense of the members of the group. And just like with the previous two categories, there are examples of this in my previous video. All right, now that we have those three categories out the way, let's go into our red flags and explain how each of these red flags fall into one of these three categories. All right, red flag number one was Berg's relational misconduct with a church employee. Now, this is exploitation because it abuses the power that Berg was given in order to make unwanted advances towards this employee. Now, while this is an example of exploitation, this also gives us some insight into Berg's character, and we'll be seeing more of his character or lack thereof as we go further into these red flags. The second red flag is Berg's coining of the term the system to refer to anyone outside of the group. What this does is it effectively creates an us versus them mentality, creating a reliance among themselves within the group and a distrust for anyone outside of it. Now, this is deception because it creates a false narrative of the outside world and makes the people that are in this group incredibly reliant on themselves and no one else. This restricts the flow of information coming into this group, making the members easier to control. All right, red flags 3, 4, and 9 I'm going to link together because they're all sort of talking about the same thing. And this is the names that Berg and Zerby took to refer to themselves. The names, as I stated before, were things like King, Moses, God's prophet for the contemporary world, Queen Maria, etc. The reason that cult leaders take on names like this is because they want to kind of push aside criticism. And the easiest way to avoid criticism is to equate yourself with somebody that cannot be criticized. In this situation, it would be by equating themselves to kings, prophets, prominent biblical figures, whatever. So in essence, what they're doing is they're equating themselves with God so that they cannot be criticized, or so that their followers would be very hesitant to bring any form of criticism against them. Red flag number 5 is how this group went about handling children in their group. What this group did was they took the parents out of the equation entirely when it came to raising the children. The children were instead raised by the group collective as a whole. What this did was it limited the parents' interaction and any say-so that they had over these kids' lives. This allowed the group to then teach the kids whatever they wanted without interference. The more concerning part about this is that when the parents would try to regain control of their kids, these children were then sent to other parts of the world in which their parents did not have access. And red flag number 5 is going to fall under the category of control. All right, red flag number 6. This is the rough one, and that is flirty fishing. So flirty fishing actually falls into the category of both exploitation and deception. Exploitation was used in the sense that these women that were going out and performing these tasks were not likely doing this willingly. See, there was a set of, for lack of a better term, cultural norms that were in place in this group. These cultural norms basically expressed that if anyone came up to you expressing an interest in relations, that you were supposed to give in without asking any questions. Yeah. Anyone that did ask questions or refused to give in to these things was quickly ridiculed for it and seen to be selfish, among other things. In short, it was considered to be an extreme social no-no to refuse advances of other people. So with that said, it was likely that these women went out under the agenda of someone else other than themselves as well. This is also considered deception, as what these women were doing could be considered an extreme form of love bombing. Love bombing, I went into this a bit in my previous video as well, but love bombing in short is giving someone an excessive amount of affirmation and compliments so that they feel really good about themselves. Flirty fishing is the extreme version of this because one of the most affirming and complimenting things that you can do for somebody is to have relations with them. Furthermore, this tactic was also taking advantage of the vulnerable state that these men were in when they were succumbing to the advances of these women. As you can probably tell, I struggled getting through that because this one is a difficult one for me to talk about, as it is one of the more egregious red flags of this group. Now, red flag number 7, we kind of already talked about. This was the allegations of relation abuse. There were over 300 allegations made against the leaders of these groups. And furthermore, there was a lot of evidence backing these up. And this red flag falls into the category of exploitation, as it is people in positions of power taking advantage of those that are under them. Now, red flag number 8 was Berg's justification for the relational abuse. What Berg said is that God is for relations while the devil is against it. He was essentially misusing the higher power, i.e. God, for his own agenda. All right, moving on to our last red flag number 10. This was the various amount of name changes that this group went through. Now, name changes a lot of the time can be benign in nature, but in this case, I would argue that they are very deceptive. I would argue that they're deceptive because a lot of these name changes take place around the many accusations that this group received. It seems, in my opinion, that these name changes were done in order to distance the group from these allegations as well as protect themselves from further allegations. Now, they might themselves call this a rebrand, but I'm definitely going to call it deception, and it falls into the deception category. So, is this a cult? Well, it's hard to say. I am going to assert that up until Berg's passing, it definitely was a cult. You see, most of the red flags were centered around Berg and when he had control over the group. There were still some red flags that Zerby partook in, but not nearly as many as Berg. Zerby, when she took control, she appeared to change a lot of things about the group, including the love charter, which was said to improve the quality of life of the members significantly. But then there is a question that comes to my mind. Were these changes genuine? It's hard to say, but I'm leaning more so on them not being genuine, and here's why. Cults will often hide their true beliefs and tactics in order to continue to operate without being ridiculed, criticized, or in some cases taken down by the government. What appears to have happened to me is that some of the true tactics, or many of the true tactics of this group became known to the public, like the flirty fishing tactic, and as well as their open policy of having relations with minors. So some of these things became well known, and then instead of stopping these tactics, they instead gave the impression that they were stopping these tactics. And this can be seen with the presentation to the media and the general public of them being more mainstream and conservative to fit in with the Christians of the time. After they did this, I believe that they continued to operate the way that they always had, but they did so in a more covert way. And the things like the love charter and other changes to their literature were done so to avoid any extra unwanted attention. Now, this is just my theory, and I don't have any concrete evidence for this, but I do consider it likely, as this is a pattern that a lot of similar groups take. I have also heard from other people that are researching this group that there is still relational abuse happening to this day, indicating that this group truly has not changed their ways. Now, if this is true, then unfortunately these horrible things are still happening at the hands of this group. But as of right now, I have no concrete way of knowing this. So, in short, yes, this group was a cult, and I do believe that it still is, although I have no concrete evidence indicating this. So, if you or anyone you know has had interactions with this group and can tell me anything more than I've already said today, I would greatly appreciate it. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me in the comments below. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. This is going to be the third video that I've ever put out. My plan is to continue to keep going down MetaRuner's Iceberg and evaluate some of the different cult entries on there to see if they fit my criteria for a cult. So, just like I've said before, if you guys have any ideas, suggestions for me to improve, or any content that you'd like to see, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And you can do this in the comments below. Alright guys, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you. My plan for future videos is to continue on with MetaRuner's Iceberg chart and just continue evaluating the cults that are on there. Alright guys, well, we've made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I enjoyed making this one. This one took a little bit longer as there was a considerable amount of research that went into this one, and it was something that piqued my interest pretty significantly. But anyway guys, if you have any ideas of how I could improve or any content that you want to see in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Bye.